Dad refused to walk me down the aisle because my sister, a.K.A. his favorite, insisted that he could only escort one daughter down the aisle, and so he had to pick. But just 1 week before my wedding, he turns up at my house in tears, begging me to give him another chance. BC's sister ended up switching her mind and choosing Mom's wealthy new boyfriend over him, scamming him into paying for the whole wedding. But this time I still refused. You know, I never thought of myself as a vindictive person. Not really. But let me tell you, there is nothing quite like karma being served up piping hot on a silver platter, and oh, did it feel good. Can you imagine your own father, weeks before your wedding, telling you he won't walk you down the aisle because he made a promise to your sister to walk her first? And then, that sister, she does the absolute unthinkable. My life used to be filled with this deep, constant ache from years of emotional neglect and trauma caused by my father. But now, he has no one else, and suddenly, I'm the daughter he remembers, the one he never really liked in the first place. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. I'm the middle child, a woman in between my older brother, Finn, who's 37, and my younger sister, Sarah, 29. For most of our childhood, we looked like a happy family from the outside. My mom, 59, always tried to be an equal parent, and I've always loved her for that. But my dad, 65, he made his favoritism blatantly obvious. Sarah was the absolute apple of his eye, his little princess. And Finn, well, he was the son, so they bonded over man things. Guess who was left out of that dynamic? Me. It started so young. I just always felt like Dad didn't really like me. I tried to voice it a few times, mostly through kid tantrums, because, yeah, I was a difficult child. But nothing I did ever made him pay much attention to me. So as I grew up, I just accepted it. Mom, I think, saw right through his favoritism, and she always tried to compensate. She saw me. She really saw me. And if it wasn't for her, I probably would have just stayed invisible my entire life. She was, and still is, the equal parent, treating us all the same. And Finn, he saw it too. He saw my neglect, how I was always a bit aloof. He tried to fill that gap. He'd actually asked Dad to let me come along when he taught Finn how to change tires. He made sure I was there when Dad taught Finn how to drive. I know it was Finn, because Dad never, ever included me in those conversations himself. It wasn't like I was abused, or anything like that. We got similar gifts. I got new dresses just like Sarah. It was just, I was never taken care of emotionally by Dad. Mom and Finn tried to fill that hole, and for that, I will always be grateful. Sarah, on the other hand, she just loved being the little princess. She was a snobby kid, and her school raised so many red flags about her attitude, but somehow, all those concerns just got swept under the rug. She grew up to be this incredibly exhausting, entitled young woman. So no, Finn and I are close to her. Finn actually can't stand her, and Mom just tolerates her. The only person who doesn't see a problem with Sarah's behavior is, you guessed it, Dad. Around 10 years ago, Mom and Dad divorced. It was amicable, or so they said. We were all adults by then, so no custody battles. They just told us they weren't compatible anymore, which we all knew was a lie. I'm almost certain it wasn't infidelity, because neither of them dated anyone for a long time afterward. To this day, we still don't know what really happened, and they prefer to keep it that way. After the divorce, I personally preferred not to visit Dad much. Let's be real, there was no love lost between us. He never complained about my absence, so I guess it suited us both. I usually went to Mom's place. Finn and Sarah, they split their time equally between both parents. Finn and I sometimes coordinated our visits to Mom's, but we never went with Sarah, unless it was a major holiday like Christmas. Finn just genuinely couldn't stand her. So yeah, we looked pretty functional and normal to anyone on the outside. But things changed. And for the worse if you're Dad, for the better if you're me. 5 years ago, Mom started dating Arthur, who's 60. They met at a yoga retreat and hit it off instantly. He's a really cool guy. He's good to Mom, good to Finn and me, and he never tries to push boundaries. I assume he's okay with Sarah too, though I've never seen them interact much. Mom is happy, and that's truly all that matters. Arthur is even cordial with Dad, even though Dad gives him a lot of attitude. I think it's because Dad's dating life hasn't been successful. He doesn't have a stable partner, and honestly, Arthur earns way more than Dad. Mom's life is pretty luxurious now compared to when she was with Dad. We're all happy for Mom, But Dad? He's just bitter. He hates that we have a good relationship with Arthur. Even though Finn has tried to explain to Dad that none of us are replacing him, we're just being sensible adults. It's all quite childish and extremely off-putting. Thankfully, I didn't have to deal with much of it because I barely interacted with Dad. So that's the background. And trust me, it's all important for what happened in the last couple of days. A few months ago, my fiancé, Kieran, 34, proposed. We've been together for a long while. I didn't announce the engagement immediately because I value my privacy, but we wanted a short engagement and to get married as soon as possible. So once we picked a date, a week from now, actually, we let our families know. The reaction was mixed. Finn and Mom were overjoyed. Arthur was happy too. Dad had a very normal reaction, which was rare. But Sarah, she seemed quite upset. It was all over a video call, and I could literally see her force a smile before she disconnected. I was expecting some kind of tantrum from her because she hates not being the center of attention, but I couldn't be bothered with her drama at that point. I called Finn separately to gossip, and that's when I told him something big. I wanted him, not Dad, to walk me down the aisle. He was quiet for a while. Then he said that while he was incredibly touched, he felt it was inappropriate. He said Dad would cause a huge fuss. He'd love to do it, but he just couldn't because he didn't want to upset Dad. I was hurt, deeply hurt. I told him I came to him precisely because Dad had repeatedly failed me, and Finn knew that. I wanted him there because he had been my male protective figure, far more than Dad ever was. It was an emotional conversation, and I hate to admit it, but he also kind of made sense. I didn't fight him on it. He gently told me that whether he walked me down the aisle wasn't as important as me having a day with the least possible drama, so I could look back on it happily. He said if he took Dad's role, Dad would stay pissy the whole ceremony and just ruin the memories. He was right. Dad was absolutely capable of that stunt. What Finn said, it was ultimately going to make my date easier, even if not ideal. He told me to talk to Dad. I said I was reluctant but would think about it. Then, thankfully for me, 2 weeks later, Sarah announced her engagement to her boyfriend, Zach. Kieran and I exchanged looks. I just knew she'd try to upstage my wedding or pull some other stunt, but what could I do? Finn wasn't happy either. We both understood the timing was off, but we had to stay quiet. One good thing. Sarah's wedding date was a month after mine, about 5 weeks from now. She had desperately wanted to get married before me, but the stars never aligned in her favor. She had to settle for being the second bride. She was salty about it, and she even tried to guilt-trip me into postponing my wedding. But I stayed firm. I was not going to pander to her whims. So, things stayed as they were. However, apparently, Dad and Sarah had some twisted pact that he would walk her down the aisle first before walking me down the aisle. I honestly don't know how they came up with something so messed up. I guess they just assumed I'd never get married, or would get married much later, because I never had much luck with boys in school or college. So, when I finally asked Dad to walk me down the aisle after Sarah had announced her engagement, he regretfully told me he had promised his baby he would walk her down the aisle first. He even pulled out this lie about making the promise years ago when she was on her deathbed, which, obviously, never happened. He couldn't go back on his word and break her heart, so he wouldn't be able to walk me down the aisle. I won't lie, I was ecstatic. I didn't want him walking me down the aisle anyway. I pretended to be so sad and hurt, but internally, I was doing a full-blown happy dance. I told him I respected his promise to Sarah, and while it hurt me a lot, it didn't. I would accept it. I immediately called Finn and told him everything. He was furious at Dad. He said if he'd known Dad would behave like this, he would have jumped at the chance the moment I first asked him. He said if Dad could choose which daughter to give his privilege to, so could I. He was mad at Dad, but I was just too happy to even care. It had ultimately become exactly what I wanted, and I couldn't be happier. Things were actually going well, despite all the stress of wedding planning. I'd been jittery and nervous, but everything seemed well in place until yesterday. That's when unprecedented drama slammed into my life, and I honestly had zero stamina for it. Last evening, Sarah informed Dad that he wouldn't be walking her down the aisle. She asked Arthur to do it. It came as a shock to all of us. She did it over video call, no less. It was brutal. She could have been so much more sensitive about it. We all knew Dad was looking forward to her wedding. He was even paying for all of it because her fiancé and she wanted to save their money for the honeymoon. Dad and Mom had a lot on their plate helping plan 2 weddings, and Dad had almost completely mentally checked out of mine. He had no input, no suggestions. He was just completely disinterested in anything related to my wedding because all his focus was on Sarah. Moreover, he hadn't contributed a single dime towards my wedding. Kieran and I are funding it ourselves. It had gotten so bad that I was relying more on Mom and Arthur's approval for suggestions than Dad's. Arthur was actually involved in my wedding, which was definitely not the case with Sarah. This is exactly why even Arthur looked taken aback by Sarah's request, or rather demand. He didn't know how to respond. He kept looking at Mom. We were all at a loss for words, and Mom, bless her, finally said Arthur would love to do it. It had to be one of the worst calls I've ever attended, and I work in corporate, so bad calls are kind of my staple. By then, Dad was in tears. Instead of talking to Sarah about it, he just started cussing out Arthur and disconnected the call. And that was that. I'm sure the others must have asked him how he was feeling, but I didn't. I had many other things to worry about, so I promptly exited the call. Plus, this wasn't my issue anyway. It was a promise between Sarah and him, one that he didn't want to break, and if she did, that was between them. I had no intention or desire to intervene. They could sort this out amongst themselves. I had no role to play in this, and this was not the time to involve me in petty family issues that did not concern me. Little did I know, it would end up concerning me very, very soon. To my utter annoyance, Dad called me last night in tears. This was just a few hours after the devastating blow his little princess had inflicted on him. He was sobbing on the phone, telling me he was a fool for rejecting my offer of letting him walk me down the aisle, and that he would love to do it for me now. I couldn't believe my ears. The entitlement was shocking. I told him, very gently, that while I felt very sad for what had happened, it was something between Sarah and him, and it in no way changed what I had planned for my wedding. I told him Finn was walking me down the aisle, and that had been decided months ago, and I could not change it at the last minute. He said he would talk to Finn, and that Finn was just a placeholder for him anyway, and I didn't have to worry about Finn not agreeing. I told him it wasn't about Finn not agreeing. I didn't want to hurt Finn. And also, I didn't want him to walk me down the aisle in the first place, but he didn't need to know that. He insisted he would talk to Finn and set things straight, like they should be. But I told him, firmly, that a swap was not happening. Finn would be walking me down the aisle, and that was final. He was in complete denial, honestly. He thought I was only resisting because Finn wouldn't step down, and he was confident he could talk him out of it. I disconnected the call and called Finn right after. I spoke to Dad and told him what was up. To say Finn was livid would be an understatement. He asked me what I wanted, and I told him that I had always wanted him to be the one to give me away. He was the first person I had asked, and it was only at his insistence that I had even asked Dad in the first place. He asked me if I was sure I wanted him to walk me down the aisle. I said yes. He then told me I didn't need to worry about anything, and he would set Dad straight for me if Dad did call him. I told him I didn't want any drama at the wedding, and that Dad needed to be informed that he couldn't just breeze in whenever he liked and use me as a replacement daughter just because his favorite had kicked him to the curb. Finn told me not to worry about it, that he would see to it Dad knew there was no change in the wedding plans. This was last night, and I've had no communication with either of them since then, and it's driving me sick. Everything was going well, and I really don't have it in me to deal with this drama right now. I don't know if I should talk to them, and I don't know what has happened between Finn and Dad, if he has spoken to him at all. I'm nauseous with anxiety, and I just don't know what to do. Update 1. The bombshell okay, so I finally spoke to Finn. Things are a mess, worse than I thought, but thankfully, he's got most of it handled, so it's not going to ruin my wedding. Finn said he was waiting for Dad to call him up and talk about the supposed change in plans, but the call never came. That's when he realized Dad wasn't even going to discuss any of this. Just because he had decided he would walk me down the aisle automatically meant everyone had to be okay with it. Finn waited a day, but when Dad didn't reach out, he called him himself. He asked Dad if there was a change of plans, because I had mentioned something. Dad tried to act all nonchalant and said that I had asked him to walk me down the aisle, since Sarah wouldn't be doing that anymore. Now, the thing with Finn is, he's very diplomatic. He's the sensible, level-headed one among the three of us. So, when he told me he went full-on ballistic on Dad, I was genuinely shocked. Finn said he told Dad to cut the crap. He said both of them knew I hadn't asked him to walk me down the aisle, but rather, he was the one who had begged to have the role of the father in my wedding because his favorite daughter had kicked him out. When Dad heard this, he was obviously furious. He has that typical habit of reacting viciously when confronted with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear. But before he could cut in and say anything, Finn told him to shut the hell up for once and listen. He said Dad should be grateful he was even getting an invite to my wedding, given the way he had treated me all these years. And then, Finn just tore a new one into him. He actually apologized to me, saying he knew it wasn't his place to lash out at Dad like this, especially days before my wedding. But he said he just couldn't control himself. He wanted Dad to know what he really was, to come out of the facade he was living in. He said everything. He said Dad had always favored Sarah the most, and would at least try to make an effort with Finn, but that I was always an afterthought for him. And I knew it. He also said that I had actually asked Finn to walk me down the aisle, and he was my first option anyway, but it was Finn's insistence that had made me talk to Dad in the first place. Finn said he had hoped Dad would take up the offer and at least start to mend the relationship he had with me, but he blew his chance. Finn told Dad he was a failure of a father because out of his 3 kids, none of them loved or respected him. Finn didn't respect Dad because he couldn't be a fair parent. I didn't respect him because he never bothered to love me or treat me like his daughter. And funnily enough, even Sarah didn't respect him because if she did, she wouldn't have pulled the stunt she did. He said Sarah growing up to be an entitled, horrible person was on Dad because he was the one who had pampered her and raised her all these years. He said Sarah's personality, and a horrible one at that, was Dad's creation, and it served him right that he was discarded by his favorite child because he had been discarding his children since they had been born. Finn said there was quite a lot more that he had said, but he didn't remember most of it since it was said in a blinding rage. He assured me that after the stern reality check Dad had gotten, I didn't have to worry about him pulling any stunts, and if he did, Finn would set him straight right there. He also said there was absolutely no change in plans, that he would be the one walking me down the aisle, and he would not change it for the world. He apologized for the ruckus, especially right before the wedding, but I was more thankful than anything else. In all my life, I have never had the strength to take this kind of a stand for myself. I had always assumed this was how my life was supposed to be. I always thought that maybe Dad didn't love me because of some fault of mine. I tried to outgrow that feeling over the years, but I never could. And here, I had my brother, taking this fierce stand for me, something I had never expected anyone to do. My mother should have when we were kids, but she didn't. She tried to make up for the lack of affection in her own way, but she never stood up for me. I don't blame her for it, but it was her diffidence and deference towards Dad that made me feel that maybe there would never be a situation where I could tell him how horrible he was being to me. But that had changed, and it had changed only because my brother loved me so much that he couldn't bear the thought of me going through this anymore. I had tears in my eyes by the time he narrated the entire incident and was practically choking when I told him this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me. I don't think Finn realizes the magnitude of what he has done, but it has to be the best thing I could ever ask for. Update 2. The wedding day I'm now a married woman. I actually got married a few days ago, and I'm currently enjoying my honeymoon with Kieran in Thailand. The wedding went without a hitch, though there was still some drama before it. With Finn not backing down and Dad not being able to walk even one daughter down the aisle, things had gotten quite serious. The main thing Dad was concerned with was how the extended family would view him if he was missing from both kids' weddings. This was the point he kept circling back to when Finn and he had a chat again. Finn told him point blank that, at least for my wedding, he was missing the role of the father because he was emotionally checked out with me anyway, and Finn said he should be grateful he was even getting an invite in the first place. And as for Sarah, nobody really knows why she did what she did, and he could only ask himself what went wrong with her, since she was his favorite. Word got around to Sarah, and she had the audacity to call me and say that I needed to have Dad walk me down the aisle since she couldn't, and that it was just unfair to him. I told her to eat it. I reminded her she was the one funding her wedding on Dad's money and had then kicked him out. I told her that I had gone to Dad, and he had chosen to only walk her down the aisle because of some stupid promise she couldn't honor. And if she was so hurt that her dear old daddy was miserable, she was more than welcome to switch things back up at her wedding. I told her I was sure Arthur would understand, and that I could even talk to him for her since she was feeling so bad about Dad. She didn't have much to say to that and just cut the call. I called Finn up and told him I didn't want to be part of any more dad drama before the wedding. It was his responsibility to ensure none of it came to me. I was done with this. I had 100 other things to worry about or feel excited about, and I couldn't let Dad ruin my day. He had already made me miserable for the majority portion of my life, and I couldn't have him take away from the most special day of my life as well. Finn told me not to worry, not to feel anxious, and that he would take care of everything. To say I was white with nerves on my wedding day would be an understatement. But thankfully, everything was under control. Dad looked quite sullen, but he didn't try to start any crap, so I'm thankful for that. And honestly, I was too busy enjoying myself after a point to even worry about his pouty face. Sarah tried to stay as far away from Dad as possible, and it was quite awkward between them, but I didn't care. The wedding went without a hitch, and I'm glad nobody could dampen the day. When Finn walked me down the aisle, I could practically feel Dad glaring daggers at my back, but that was all he could do. I've been told that a couple of people have been asking why Finn was up there and not Dad, and now he has been left to do some damage control. But well, that's his cross to bear. I just want to be done with Sarah's wedding as well, so that there's no scope for any more drama and I can live life in peace. Once her wedding is done, I'm going to go low contact with Dad for the foreseeable future. I don't see the point of staying in touch with him anyway. Update 3. Final blow: Sarah got married yesterday. I wouldn't know how it went because she uninvited both Kieran and me from the wedding. I don't know what she wanted to achieve by this, but I was more than happy to sit it out. To her dismay, even Finn didn't go. So it was only Mom, Arthur, and Dad there. Dad was apparently hopeful that she would change her mind at the last minute and have him walk her down the aisle, but that never happened. From what photos she's posted, it looks uncomfortable as hell. Arthur would clearly rather be anywhere but there. Dad is sullen, Arthur is uncomfortable, and Mom is just done. Other than that, she's fine. Her wedding went well too, not that I care. Mom called me up to give me these details. Dad is miserable, naturally, because he had been holding out hope that at least one of us would succumb and let him do what he wants to. But now, all of his kids are practically estranged from him, and his personal life is a mess as well. He is not taking it well, but I honestly couldn't care less. I truly feel it serves him right for being such a shitty father to me, for letting me have a horrible childhood, and not just that, for actively contributing to it. Have you ever experienced such a satisfying moment of karma, or had a family member totally stand up for you like Finn did for me? What would you have done in my place? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.